पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नाम्ने गौरत्विषे नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So, thank you. Hare Krishna. So, we will continue the overview of the prayers of Queen Kunti, which I had been taken around 3-4 months ago in November, when His Grace Shyamananda had gone to. No problem? Okay, is it better now? So when Shyamananda had gone to Vrindavan Yatra, I had started an overview of the prayers of Queen Kunti. So I'll continue that. We won't go into the lecture that Srila Prabhupada has given, but we'll look at the verses. So we had completed till verse 31st. So I'll do a quick overview till 31, and then we'll continue in our somewhat more detailed overview. So we have here the Kunti's prayers are the first prayers in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and they extend from the 18th verse to the 43rd verse in the first canto, 8th chapter. So now among these 26 verses, the first 5 verses, 18 to 22, talk about Krishna's transcendental position. Then they talk about 23rd to 27, talk about how Krishna protects in inconceivable ways. It means in this world there are many dangers, but Krishna protects. And the heart of this prayer is 25. The 25th verse, where Kunti Maharani is saying, let there be more calamities. Let there be more calamities. This is completely opposite to the kind of prayers most people offer. That is 23 to 27. That even when there are calamities, there is protection of Krishna. So Krishna's inconceivable protection is talked about. Then 28 to 31 talks about Krishna's extraordinary pastimes. You know, how he appears in various forms. God, who is supreme, how can he appear in the form of a fish or a hog? How can he appear like a small child who is afraid of his mother? So he talks about how Krishna's pastimes are baffling, they are mysterious. And now the section which we are going to start from today is 32 to 35, which is the mysterious reasons for Krishna's appearance. Why does Krishna appear in this world? So, do all of you have these sheets of Kunti's prayers? So, if you can look at these sheets, we will recite the verses. As we do the verses, we will recite them. So, we will recite a verse, then we will discuss it, then we will recite that verse once again, then we will go to the next verse. So, till the 31st verse, we had completed. So, 31st verse is Gopya Date, so that we had completed. So on the first page, the last verse, now we begin. Kechidahurajam jatam punya shlokasya kirtaye yalo priyasan bhavaye Kunti Maharani, in each of these verses, each verse gives one reason for the appearance of Krishna. So Kechit. Kechit means, she's saying, some people say like this. So sometimes people think that when there is, if we are in a devotee community, everybody should have one opinion. That is, you're a devotee means, okay, whatever your authority tells you, that's what you have to do. And all of us should have one opinion. But it's not necessarily like that. Because devotees are individuals. And as individuals, based on Guru Sadhu Shastra, we can think differently and we can accordingly get a different understanding of Shastra. So that is not wrong. So she is using the word Kechit ahurajam jatam. Kechit means some people say like this. So she will say in the next verse, apare. Some other people say like that. And still some other people say like that. Now in some places, Krishna does it in the Bhagavad Gita, and in the 18th chapter, he says, some people say that we should renounce work. Other people say that we should do work. And interestingly, when Krishna is using this, he doesn't say these people are foolish and these people are intelligent. He says, Yajnadana tapah karma natyajyamiti chapare. So some people see that Yajnadana tapah karma, these are the normal dharmic activities. Yajna, dana and tapa. So the whole idea is that in this world, we are souls who are encircled by different material coverings. So we are encircled with our body. That's the first covering. Then we are encircled by society. That's the second covering. And then we are encircled by the environment, by nature. That's the third covering. Now each of these coverings can cause us sufferings. The suffering which comes from the bodily covering, that is called as the Adhyatmic Klesh. The suffering that comes from the society, that is called as the Adi Bhautik Klesh. The suffering that comes from the nature, that is called as the Adi Daivik Klesh. So we as souls are encircled by all these three circles within the material world. And to live harmoniously with these, we have to act in particular ways. So tapa is the way we harmonize with our body. By doing austerity, we perform sacrifice for the body. That's how we harmonize with the body. Then dana, charity, is the means by which we harmonize with society at large. And yajna, that is fire sacrifices, that is how we harmonize with nature. Krishna talks about this in the 3rd chapter. So basically, yajna dana tapa karma natyajyamiti chapare. So some people say that this should not be given up. And before this, in 18.3, Krishna says, karyam doshavaditi karma. So yajnadana tapa, so he says yajnadana tapa, these are doshavad, these are false. Iti prahur manishinaha. So manishinaha means those who are thoughtful. So Krishna is saying some thoughtful people say that yajnadana tapa should be given up. And other thoughtful people say that yajnadana tapa should not be given up. So significantly, although there is a difference of opinion here, Krishna is not saying that this group is foolish and this group is intelligent. Krishna is saying both people are thoughtful. Both people's opinions are to be respected. But then Krishna says after that I will give you my definitive opinion. Nishchitam shrunume atra tyage bharata sattam. He goes and describes various things, but there is a nishchitam shrunume atra. Now I will give my definitive opinion. So in some cases, there can be a definitive opinion, but even when there is a definitive opinion, that does not mean that the disputing opinions have to be rejected as deviant, as ridiculous. No. Okay, if there is authority who gives a definite opinion, and we accept that. But if there is no such authority who will give a definitive opinion, then the different opinions can still be respected. And then whichever one we find suitable, we can accept that. In the 11th canto, Krishna speaks the Uddhav Gita. And in the Uddhav Gita, Krishna analyzes the material elements. So normally when we analyze the material elements, we analyze them into like in the 13th chapter, verses 6 and 7. Krishna talks about the analysis of the vertical Mahabhutani Ahankaro Buddhiravyaktameva cha Indriyani Dashaikam cha Panchachendriya Gocharaha. So he says that this material world, if you want to divide it into various elements, we can divide it into 24 elements. So he says Mahabhutani, that is the 5 gigantic elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. Ahankaro, then that is the 6th element, false ego. Mahabhutani Ahankaro Buddhir Avyaktameva cha. Then there is intelligence and there is unmanifest, that is Pradhan. So now we have 8 elements. Indriyani Dashaikam cha. Then there are 11 senses. So how are the 11 senses? The 5 working senses, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and the mind. That makes it 11. So we have now 90, 8 plus 11. And then Panchachendriya Gocharaha. Then there are 5 sense objects. There is touch, smell, like that. So there are 24 total. But Krishna says in the Uddhav Gita that there are some other thinkers, they analyze the material element into sometimes 13 elements, sometimes 16 elements, sometimes 22 elements, sometimes 27 elements. And he says that I am pleased by the creativity of the thinkers who analyze in this way. So he does not call them as speculators. He says, I am pleased by the creativity with which people think in this way. So why does he say that? Because the material world can be analyzed in different ways. And only if somebody starts saying, okay, that the soul is also a product of matter, or God is also a product of matter, then there will be an incorrect philosophical understanding. But there are sometimes, when you talk about the senses, there are 10 senses and there are 5 sense objects. But because the sense objects come from the elements. Now, taste comes from water. Rasoham apsu kaunteya, Krishna says in the 7th chapter, that taste comes from water. So therefore, sometimes taste and water are included as one element. So 5 elements will be cut down, then you will have 19 elements instead of 24. So this way, what will happen is, the number of elements can be different. Now this specific example may seem technical, but I am making a general point here. The general point is that we can have different opinions, and it is not that necessarily one opinion has to be authoritative. So just a few days ago we had elections. So now with respect to elections, some devotees may feel that we should vote in elections. Some others may feel that we shouldn't vote in elections. Now it's not necessary as devotees we have to have only one opinion. So different devotees can feel differently. Whatever they feel inspired by, they can do that. So Prabhupada is told that devotees should be independently thoughtful. That means we use our intelligence to think how best we can serve Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, how we can serve the mission of Sanatana Dharma. And some devotees may feel that, okay, by participating in the democratic process, we can express our voice, and that's how we'll be able to affect society in some small way. Others may feel this whole process is nonsense, and just by participating in it, I'm endorsing this process. So I don't want to do that. So now both opinions, if they are motivated by sincerity of intention, then both actions, they are valid. It's not that one is right and another is wrong. So at that time, just before the elections, I gave a talk on YouTube, which is quite widely circulated, how voting in elections is a social responsibility of devotees. So many devotees liked that talk, and then somebody sent it to Bhakti Vikas Maharaj. And then Bhakti Vikas Maharaj gave a counter talk saying that voting is not the social responsibility of devotees. And then both of these were put on the homepage of ISKCON Desire. And then what happened, it became a controversy. So, how can there be two different opinions and a brahmachari is opposing a sannyasi? Then yesterday I wrote a mail to Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, and Bhakti Vikas Maharaj called me yesterday. And then he himself gave a talk, which he also broadcast now. He himself said that you don't have to, it's not that devotees have to be zombies, that everybody has to have one opinion. He said that I disagree with you, but I respect your right. You are thinking based on Shastra. I gave a particular reasoning why devotees can vote in elections. He gave a different reasoning saying why the devotees should not vote in elections. And he said that actually, if both of us are reasoning based on Shastra, there's nothing wrong with it. So only if somebody's reasoning comes up with something which is very strongly critical or opposed to Shastra. Like I said, if somebody says that the soul is a product of matter, or God is a material entity, then that would be a serious problem, because that is a philosophical deviation. But we shouldn't think of the Guru Sadhu Shastra's stance, understanding like one straight line. It is more like a circle. Within that circle, as long as we are within the circle of the understanding of Guru Sadhu Shastra, and some people can have one opinion, other people can have different opinions. So here, Kunti Maharani is telling that Kechid ahur ajam jatam. So when Krishna appears in this world, why does he appear? No, it's like, say, this world as we know is like a prison house. So and Krishna is like the supreme emperor. Now if the emperor comes to the prison house, the prisoners may discuss, why has the emperor come over here? Isn't it? So he's saying, some people say like this, Kechi, some people, Ahur, they say Ajam, Jatam. Ajam, that Lord who is unborn. So anybody who has to take birth in this anybody who appears in this world has to take a birth. But Krishna, she's using opposite words over here. Ajam, Jatam. The unborn became born. So this sort of usage, where two opposite words are brought together, this is called in English as an oxymoron. It's a figure of speech. Oxymoron means, for example, if somebody says this, he is a courageous coward. Now somebody can either be courageous or can be a coward. What does it mean? Because often it is said that suicide is an act of courageous cowardice. Suicide is an act of courageous cowardice. What does it mean? Actually, to end one's life requires courage. If a soldier goes on a warfield and lays down his life, then it requires courage. But then, that willingness to lay down one's life, not for some higher cause, but because one is frustrated with life, that is cowardice. So that is courageous cowardice. Sometimes two contradictory words may be brought together to convey some deeper meaning. So, or somebody may say that Mr. So-and-so is an intelligent fool. Now we may say either somebody is intelligent or somebody is foolish. How can somebody be an intelligent fool? The idea is that the person may be intelligent, but at this particular point the person is acting foolishly. That's why we can say that the person is an intelligent fool. So Kunti Maharani is using this oxymoron over here. Ajam, Jatam. That Lord is unborn, but he takes birth. How does he take birth if he is unborn? Now people often ask this question, that if God made everything, then who made God? If God created everything, who created God? Now this question itself indicates a misunderstanding about who God is. If you think God just as some image that we see in a temple, then that's not a proper understanding of God. Yes, God manifests as the image in the temple, as the deity, but God is the source of everything. That is the definition of God. Sarvakarina Karinam. So now, even from the point of logic, the source of everything cannot have a source. If the source of everything has a source, then that will become the source. So Krishna has the source of everything. But therefore, he does not have a source. When I say this doesn't make any sense, how can something not have a source? So to understand this, Krishna exists in a different dimension. Now, if a child reads a novel for the first time, and after reading the novel, find that there is a hero, there is a heroine, there is a villain, there are assistant characters. And then after reading it, then the parents tell, this particular novel, okay, you are reading Harry Potter, it is written by J.K. Rowling. Okay, but where is J.K. Rowling in the book? I can't find. He says, no, the author will not be in the book. The author created the characters, the author created the storyline, the author created timeline, the author created the plot, but the author is not in this novel. So like that, God created life, God created matter, God created even time. So God set the material existence in motion, but God exists outside it all. So that's why He is the source of everything, and He does not have any source. So that is conveyed by the idea Ajam. He's unborn. Unborn, normally if we may use the word unborn, say if a lady is expecting a child, then the child is unborn, we may say. Now normally if we use the word unborn, we would use it in the sense that the child doesn't exist till now. But when the scriptures use the word unborn, that is not in the sense that it doesn't exist. Unborn, when they use it, that means it is beyond the scope of time. Beyond the scope of time. So that Lord who is beyond the scope of time sometimes appears within the time domain. Just like there will be some movies in which the director makes a cameo appearance. Normally in the movies you have hero, heroine, villain. The director is behind the screen. But sometimes the director also makes a short appearance in the movie. Or sometimes in a novel, sometimes some authors, they themselves become characters in the novel, maybe for a short while or whatever. So like that, Ajam Jatam. Krishna is beyond the time domain, but sometimes He appears within the time domain. Kechidahur Ajam Jatam Punya Shlokasya Kirtaye. So Punya Shlokasya Kirtaye. So that Lord, that king, Lord here refers to the king, Punya Shlokasya Kirtaye, to expand his glories. So Prabhupada explains this refers to Yudhishthira Maharaj. That there can be various references to this. So Yado Priyasyan Vavaye Malayasva Chandanam. So Punya Shloka can, if you look at the context, there are various meanings, as I said. Look at the verse, it is saying Yado. There was the king Yadu who was very punyavan. So in his dynasty, the Lord appeared to expand his flame. Kirtaye. Kirtaye, Kirti refers to the fame. And example is given Malayasya Chandanam. So Malaya is the place where Chandan is found frequently. Now it's not necessary that Chandan has to be found only in Malaya. Chandan can be found in many places. But because it is frequently found over there, so that place will become identified with Chandan. So this indicates similarly that the Lord could have appeared from anywhere, but He chose to appear from Yadu. And that's why it's known as Malayas. He is known as, the reason He appeared is to glorify Maharaj Yadu. So this verse itself gives an understanding of the Lord's transcendental position. So we don't choose where we appear from. We don't choose our parents at birth. We are, by the laws of karma, we are forced to take birth from a particular root. But he is saying that the Lord appeared by His own choice. Malaya Siva Chandan. Malaya can grow anywhere, but Chandan can appear anywhere, Chandan can grow anywhere, but it is growing in Malaya frequently. That's why it's identified like that. Similarly, the Lord appeared in Yadu dynasty. So let's recite this verse once again, then we'll move to the next verse. Kechidahurajam jatam Punya Shlokasya Kirtaye Yado Priyasyan Bhavaye Malayasya Chandanam Apare Vasudevasya Devakyam Yachito Ajastvamasya Kshemaya क्षेमाय वधाय च सुरद्विषाम्. So now first she said kechit, some people, and then next she says apare, some other people. So she is repeating different opinions, and then towards the end of the sequence she will give her understanding also. So Vasudevasya Devakyam. So Vasudeva and Devaki are the parents of Krishna. Yachitodhyagat. So because they beseech the Lord to appear, therefore he has appeared. Ajastam asya kshemaya, to protect them. Kshemaya. Krishna uses the word yoga kshemam pahamyaham in 9.22 in the Bhagavad Gita. Says, I am the protector and the provider. So to protect the protect Vasudeva and Devaki, and vadhaya cha suradvisham, to kill the suradvisham, the envious. So here it refers to Kamsa. So now if we look at the first and second chapters of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the appearance of Krishna is described in quite dramatic ways. When Krishna wants to appear also, he makes things quite sensational. Krishna chose to appear from Vasudeva and Devaki, but he did it in a dramatic way. When Kamsa was just going along, driving the chariot of Devaki, Asyastvamastamo garbho and ahase vadha. So there was asharirava, there was a disembodied voice that came about, and that said asyastvam ashtamo garbho. Asyas, this, that voice spoke to Kamsa. This means refer to Devaki. Ashtamo garbho, the 8th garbha. So vadho mudha, he says, will kill you, and mudha, you are a foolish person. And why? Why means you are dragging like a donkey. Sanatana Goswami, in his Vaishnava Toshani commentary, gives a very insightful analysis of this context, and he says that every word is significant over here. So Ashtamo Garbho, that's the 8th. Now it doesn't use the word Ashtamo Putro. Now normally it is expected that if one warrior is to be killed, the killer will also be a male. There are some exceptions where, say, Devi kills Mahishasur or something like that, but most of the time it's the Kshatriyas are males and they fight against demons. Now later on, when the children will appear, the 8th child that will appear from Devaki's womb will be a girl. And when the girl appears, we know, as the story unfolds, Kamsa is shocked. I was expecting a boy, how is the child appeared? And then he sees that child turns out to be Devi, Durga, and she laughs and she goes away. And at that time Kamsa thinks, oh, that Bhavishyavani was false, that Asharirava, the disembodied voice, spoke the false. So to keep Kamsa from becoming suspicious and to keep the usage gender neutral, the word is used Ashtamo Garbho, the 8th womb, the 8th child in the womb. Who is that child? That's not mentioned. And then this says Evahe Buddha. So, oh fool, you are carrying it. So it's a very harsh usage. So why is this harsh usage given? Sanatana Goswami explains that Kamsa is a Suradvisha. Kamsa is the enemy of the demons. Kamsa was Kala Nemi in his previous life, and he was killed by Lord Vishnu. In the 10th chapter of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, this battle is described. So this comes in the 9th, in the 7th and 8th chapter, the churning of the milk ocean is described. In the 9th chapter of the 8th canto, then the appearance of Mohini Murti is described. And then when the Devatas become powerful, then there's a fight between the demons and the Devatas, and slowly the Devatas started getting an upper hand. But then, the most powerful demons, Kalaneni, Bali, they all come into the fray. and they start attacking so fiercely that the tide starts turning. And despite having churned the ocean, despite having drank nectar, still it appears as if the Devatas are going to lose. And at that time, Kalanemi, who is wreaking havoc among the Devatas' ranks, he is unstoppable. And at that time, the Devatas again pray to the Supreme Lord. And at that time, Lord Vishnu himself appears. And when Lord Vishnu appears, he appears on his Garuda, and Kalanemi sees Vishnu has appeared. He takes his chariot, he has his trident, his Trishul, and he hurls it at Lord Vishnu with such force. Devatas are shocked. They thought that Vishnu has come to rescue us, but it seems Vishnu will be the first casualty will be immediately become a casualty of Kalanemi. And as the Trishul whirls through the air, splitting the sky apart in a blaze of flame, so Lord Vishnu just nonchalantly, as the Trishul is coming towards his chest to pierce it, just catches it with his hand, with blinding speed, and he turns it around and hurls it back. And before Kalanemi understood what happened, he's dead. So that Kalanemi, who's killed by Vishnu, now appears as Kamsa. So in one of the last chapters of the 10th canto, the super excellent powers of Krishna, is described that one of the distinctive features of Krishna is that when he appears, he grants liberation to the demons that he kills. When the other incarnations appear, when they kill demons, those demons may or may not become liberated. But when Krishna kills a demon, they become liberated. So when Vishnu killed Kalanemi, Kalanemi did not become liberated. But when Krishna killed Kamsa, Krishna will become liberated. So Kalanemi had an antipathy. Antipathy means hatred towards Vishnu and towards the Devatas. But when this Devata, this Asharirava, this Devata saw that actually this Kamsa has become very soft, Kamsa has become loving towards the sister. If Kamsa becomes loving towards the sister, then how will the pastime progress? So Kamsa has to show his real nature. And to show his real nature, he needs some provocation. He needs provocation. Say, anybody can appear to be a very nice, gentlemanly, principled person in normal situations. But it is only when provocation comes that the true nature comes out. It is said that provocation causes the pretender's mask to fall and the seeker's guard to rise. What does that mean? Whenever there is a provocation, if somebody is pretending, I am a very good person, then that is a mask that the person is wearing. So the mask falls. So when provocation comes, provocation causes the pretender's mask to fall. So Kamsa was pretending to be a very nice person, driving the chariot of his sister. Actually, Kamsa and Devaki were not sisters directly, brother sister, they were cousins. So Devaki was the son of Devak, and Kamsa was the son of Ugrasen, and Ugrasen and Devak were brothers. So they were cousins. But he was treating her just like a sister. And he was acting very lovingly, but as soon as there was a threat, what happened? The pretender's mask fell. That's also what happened in the gambling match. Dhritarashtra, in most of the parts of the Mahabharata, does not exhibit his greed which is there in the heart. It is there, but he lets Duryodhana, Shakuni, Karna do all the dirty work. And in public, he appears as if, I am helpless. I don't want these bad things to happen, but Duryodhana, I can't stop him. When Krishna comes as a Shanti Doot, Dhritarashtra speaks to Duryodhana. Duryodhana doesn't listen. Duryodhana just walks out of the assembly. And then Dhritarashtra turns to Krishna with a pitiful look on his face. He says, what can I do? What can I do? He's not listening to me. So he has a pretender's mask where he appears as he's not a bad person, but there are bad people around him and he can't do anything to stop them. But when the gambling match is going on, and as the Pandavas are losing their wealth and the Kauravas are gaining wealth, the Shakuni is laughing, Duryodhana and Duryodhana and Karna are also jeering the Pandavas. And what is Dhritarashtra doing? Dhritarashtra is eagerly asking, what has been won? What has been won? And then finally, when Draupadi is being staked, then he asks, is Panchali won? Is Panchali won? So what happened? When that provocation came, Dhritarashtra's pretender's mask fell off. So we can all put on a mask that we are very good people. But when provocation comes along, then that mask often falls off. Of course, it doesn't have to fall off. And even if it falls off, that doesn't mean that everyone that we are pretenders. There is another alternative. Provocation causes the seeker's guard to rise. The seeker's guard to rise means that those who are seekers, they understand, okay, this is a test now. It's a test and I have to take more shelter of Krishna. I have to become more deeply devoted to Krishna. And when I become more devoted to Krishna, I'll get inner strength, I'll get higher satisfaction. And then I'll be able to resist the situation. I'll not get provoked. So what happened? That Vasudeva and Devaki were in danger. And they begged, oh, now the 8th womb, they begged that they appear quickly. And that's why, although they knew that 7 children would die, but still they kept conceiving one after another. Because that was the only way eventually the 8th child would appear and then their misery would end. So you're saying that some people say that actually you appeared to glorify Yadu, King Yadu. Others say that you appeared to protect Devaki and Vasudeva and to kill Kamsa. And now she doesn't refute any of these opinions. Then she now goes into telling another historical narrative of why the Lord appears. So let's recite this verse once again, then we'll go to the next verse. Apare Vasudevasya Devakyam yachito Ajastvamasya Vishemaya Vadhaya Suradvishan. So now she is describing a historical narrative that happened. Bharavatarnayanye Bhuvona Vivodadhau Sidantya Bhuri Bharena Jato Yatma Bhuvatitaha. So she doesn't use any word kechit over here or apare. Some people say this, other people say this, because what she is describing is actually an event that has happened. So what is that event? The 10th canto starts with the description of this event. That is, Bhumi Devi takes on the form of a cow and goes to Brahmaji, and along with Devatas and the Bhagavatam uses the word Trinayana. Trinayana is Lord Shiva. All of them go together to the vast milk ocean, and there they pray to Lord Vishnu. And the reason is the earth is burdened by demons. So Bhar Avatar Nayanye. So Bhar is a huge burden which has to be removed. Bhuvona Ivodadam. So the earth is here compared to a boat. Now, when a boat is going along the ocean, normally if the boat has enough fuel, if there is a favorable wind, then the boat can go very easily. But one thing that can burden the boat is a huge weight. If there is if say the wind is too strong or if the fuel is too less, in emergencies, if anything has to be abandoned or discarded, then any extra weight that is there, that is a big problem. Just discard the extra weight, and once the extra weight is discarded, then there is greater probability that the boat can go on. Otherwise, the extra weight may cause the boat to sink. So, Bhuvona ivo dadhau. The earth is like a boat, it has got too much extra weight. Sidantya bhuri bharena. That bhuri bharena, which heavy weight? Jato ya atma bhuvartita atma bhuva. Bhumi is to take birth. Atma is through oneself. This refers to Brahmaji. Brahmaji doesn't have a parent directly. He appears from the navel of Lord Vishnu. So he is often called as Atma Bhu. Artita, he requested, he prayed. So because he prayed for the removal of the burden of the earth, so you have appeared. Now, this of course is a historical truth that yes, there was a prayer like that and the Lord appeared. Now, significant word over here is that bhara, burden. Now, what does burden refer to? Normally, just a weight itself doesn't have to be a burden. If a mother has a baby and has to carry the baby, now for her that's not a burden, she loves the baby. So, when does a weight become a burden? When it is unwanted. When it is unwanted. Now, coolie may have to carry a huge amount of luggage. And the coolie, that's the only way for the coolie to earn a living. And the coolie is willing to carry the luggage. But if somebody has to carry something and is not going to get anything in return for it, if somebody is a slave, the person is not going to earn any living, just has to carry it for no reason. If this is a burden. So, we often use the work, we often use the word workload. My workload is very high. So actually, the work becomes a workload when we don't like it. If we like something, in Varnashram, the idea was that people are engaged according to their natures. When people are engaged according to their natures, they like to do what they do. A Brahmana likes to study, a Kshatriya likes to manage, a Vaishya likes to do business. And when people are engaged according to their nature, then there is some material satisfaction also comes in working according to one's nature. But when we have to do something which is not according to our nature, then the work becomes a workload. That load, that bhar, that perception that it is a burden comes when it is unwanted. So now, those who appear on the earth, they are considered the children of the earth. So why would a mother consider her children to be unwanted? In one sense, no mother will consider her children to be unwanted. The earth considers all those who are there on her bosom, on the surface of the earth, as her children. Then why does she complain that these children are troubling me? Because the earth has a particular purpose. The earth is actually, in one sense, the consort of the Lord. When Lord Varaha came and he lifted the earth. So when he lifted the earth on snouts, so at that time there was a contact of the earth and Varahadev. And through that contact, Bhauma was born. So now Bhauma, it is described initially, was a good person. In fact, that's why when later on Bhumi Devi went with Bhauma to Mahavishnu, Mahavishnu was pleased to see his consort and his son, and he gave Bhauma an extremely powerful weapon. It's called the Vaishnavastra. And that Vaishnavastra went from Bhaumasura down in the dynasty. It came to Bhagadatta, and Bhagadatta used it against Arjuna. And Arjuna would have died at that time, but Krishna came in between. And Krishna came in between. That Astra, which was actually Vishnu's Astra only, that Astra was searing through space. And Arjuna was trying to shoot arrows to counter it, but nothing could counter it. Suddenly, Krishna on the chariot jumped up. And he rose to his full height. And that arrow, which was supposed to go into the chest of Arjuna, went into the chest of Krishna. But because it was a Vaishnavastra, it was Krishna's own weapon. So Vishnu's weapon will never hurt Vishnu. That's why that arrow, which was a deadly piercing arrow, as it came towards Krishna, it transformed into a garland. And it very gracefully garlanded Krishna. And Bhagadatta was infuriated. He thought, here I am going to win the war. I am going to kill Arjuna. I am going to get the greatest victory of my life. And what happened? My arrow became a garland. It's imagine some terrorist comes along and wants to shoot someone and he sends bullets out, and instead of the bullets go ahead, they become garland or flowers on the target. So Bhagadatta was like that, and he was totally exasperated. But the point I am making over here is the Vaishnavastra was given by Vishnu to Bhauma. So Bhauma initially was a good person. But when Bhauma associated with Banasura and other asuras, then he also became demoniac. And that's how he became Bhaumasura. And then he became so demoniac that the Lord himself had to kill him. You know, can you imagine a father having to kill his own child? But that is the extent to which bad association can spoil a person. But Bhauma, who was the son of the Lord himself, when he became demoniac, the Lord had to kill him. So, some people can become so demoniac that Mother Earth, who is the mother of all living beings, she feels these people are a burden on my service and I cannot have them with me. Please, O Lord, relieve me of this burden. So what is this burden? Actually, those who live on the earth but defy the purpose of the earth's existence. The purpose of the earth's existence is to facilitate the living beings to turn towards God, to live in harmony with God. So those who do not assist in this purpose, those who obstruct this purpose, they become a burden for the earth. And those who become a burden for the earth, now better remove them. In the Mahabharata it is said, Vidura tells Dhritarashtra that this son, when Duryodhana is born, at that time donkeys are braying, jackals are howling, vultures are screeching, and all inauspicious signs are there when Duryodhana is born. So Vidura tells, abandon this child, otherwise it will cause the destruction of the whole dynasty. But Dhritarashtra says, it is my own flesh and blood. How can I possibly abandon him? Impossible. So at that time Vidura says, the Dharma Shastras say that for the sake of a family, one family member can be abandoned. For the sake of a village, one family can be abandoned. For the sake of a village, for the sake of a country, one village can be abandoned. And lastly, it says, for the sake of the soul, the world can be abandoned. It says, normally, we would not like to abandon anyone who is connected with us. But if a choice has to be made, then that which is of a greater importance has to be given up for the sake of that which is of a lower importance. So a full family is greater than one member. A village is greater than one family. The country is greater than the village, and the soul is greater than everything else. So like that there is a hierarchy. So Dhritarashtra made the mistake. For a parent to be attached to a child is nothing wrong. But for the parent to be attached to a child at the expense of the well-being of everyone else in the family, that is bad. So attachment is natural to some extent. But when that attachment is disproportionate, when that attachment causes harm to others who are involved in that relationship, then it is dangerous. So the earth loves all those who take birth on the earth. But if there are some demoniac people who are disrupting and destroying the lives of everyone else on the earth, then it's extremely dangerous. So the earth does not love those children so much that she will jeopardize everyone else. And that's why what she does? No. Says, let these children, let these demoniac people who have taken birth, let them die. So the earth had prayed, please relieve me of this burden. And that is one reason why the Lord. So let's recite this verse once again. Then we'll go to the last verse that we discussed today. So, Bharavatarana Bhuvona Yodadhamu Sikantya Bhuvibharena Jato Yatma Bhuvatikaha Bhavismin Klishyamananam Avidya Kama Karmabhi Shravan Smaranarani Karishyanti Kechana. So, Bhave Asmin on this earth, Klishyamananam, suffering terribly. Avidya Kama Karmabhi. So Prabhupada quotes this verse in one of his conversations. He says this is the example of minimum words, maximum wisdom. This is in these three words, the whole material existence is summarized. Avidya Kama Karmabhi. Because of avidya, ignorance, what happens? There is kama. There is material desire. There is the desire to enjoy material things. Because as long as we think that we are bodies, we forget that we are soul. That is avidya. So if I think I am a material body, then naturally I want to enjoy material things. And then this avidya leads to kama, and then kama leads to karma. Karma means we have to work very hard in this world. And then that karma will lead to karma bandhana, and that is klishyamananam. That is described in the previous line. So avidya kama karma bhi. So in this way the souls have forgotten who they are, and the souls are bound in material existence. You know, sometimes when we hear this word bondage, yes, I am bound, people, they are all bound in samsara chakra. It's difficult for people to think, who am I bound? Actually, I can go wherever I want. I can take a flight and go to America. I can take my car and drive to some hill station. I can swim. I can do so many, wherever I want I can go. How am I bound actually? So generally we think of bondage as something stationary. No, sometimes in some movies you may see somebody is kidnapped and then the person is tied to a chair. So bondage means you are tied up and you are motionless. But actually our bonds are not like the prisoner's shackles. Our bonds are like the puppeteer's strings. The prisoner's shackles, when the prisoner is shackled, prisoner can't move. But when there is a puppet, sometimes you see a puppet show, so the puppet is moving. Puppet seems to be talking, puppet seems to be going here, puppet seems to be going there. Puppet is moving, but the puppet is controlled. There are strings which are pulling the puppet. And those strings make the puppet go here and there. So our bonds are not like the prisoner's shackles. It's not that we are forced to be motionless. We can move around, but actually we are being moved around by the strings of the modes. Nanyam gunebhya kartaram yada drashtan pashyati gunebhyascha param vedati madbhavam sodhi gacchati. So Krishna says, the learned person sees that in this world, who is the doer? Nanyam gunebhya kartaram. There is no doer other than the modes. It is the modes which are making people do. No, people move around now in the morning times in the cities. People are going at such high speed. Of course, you can't go at much high speed in the traffic, but people would like to go at very high speeds. And people are running around on stations trying to catch. So it's so much motion is there, but that motion is actually actuated by passion. It is the mode of passion which is making people run around, go here, go there, go there. So Prabhupada said that when he went to London and he saw people moving around so fast in their cars. Prabhupada said an Indian poet, he came to London and he saw, you are moving around so fast. He said, your island is so small and you are moving around so fast that you will fall off into the sea. Like you will fall off into the sea. So of course that is a metaphorical usage, but the point is that we see people moving around very fast, but it is due to the mode of passion. So sometimes say when we are trying to do our japa, and we want to do our japa, but suddenly we fall asleep. Now we don't want to sleep, but still we fall asleep. Why is that? That is because the mode of ignorance is pulling us. So we may not realize that actually we are bound, but sometimes when we want to do something and then our mind doesn't allow us to do it only. Some students want to study and the mind is, oh, I have to do that, I have to do that. What will happen about this? What will happen about that? So studying is relatively speaking a activity in goodness. But the mode of passion is Aneka Chitta Vibhranta Moha Jala Samavrata. Aneka Chitta Vibhranta. The consciousness gets pulled here and there. So the mode of passion does not allow us to concentrate. So at such times, when we want to do one thing and we are not able to do it, at that time we can understand that actually I am bound. I am bound. The modes are pulling me in particular direction. So this is the samsara bandhana and this klishyamanana. So how do we become liberated from this? So Kunti Maharani is giving in this last verse the conclusive reason why the Lord appears. The other reasons, she noticed she doesn't refute them. They are true, but she says the most important reason he appears is this last reason. What is that? Shravan smaranarhani karishyati kechana. Some people say that Shravana smaranarhani, that to promote a culture of hearing and chanting. So when we hear and chant about Krishna, then by that hearing and chanting, our spiritual consciousness gets awakened. Our spiritual consciousness gets awakened through the process of Bhakti Yoga. See, Bhakti is special among all the various processes of spirituality. There is Jnana, there is Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. But Bhakti is special. Why? For example, if one does Jnana, Aham Brahmasmi, Aham Brahmasmi, Aham Brahmasmi. I am not the body, I am the soul. I am not the body, I am the soul. I may think like that, but then that thinking in of itself does not purify me. Now I still have my desire, I still have my bodily needs, and I still have to run around. But what Bhakti does Bhakti doesn't just leave spirituality to the level of just intellection. Intellection means thinking with the intellect. Oh, I am not the body, I am not the soul, I am not the body, I am the soul, not that much. Bhakti brings emotion and action into the domain of spirituality. Bhakti brings emotion and action into the domain of spirituality. How? Because when we hear the pastimes of the Lord and we see how the various devotees interact with the Lord, our spiritual emotions get awakened. And the power of our emotions, which normally drags us down to bondage. Now our emotions are normally attracted to material things. We may attracted to some good looking object and we start getting emotions in connection with that. So normally our emotions cause bondage, but the process of bhakti helps us to channelize our emotions in a spiritual direction. And in that way, it brings our emotions within the domain of spirituality. And also it brings action. Why? Because Krishna describes in 18.46 in the Bhagavad Gita, Yataha pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam swakarmana tam abhyarcha siddhim vindati manavaha. He says that he first describes how he is the producer and pervader of everything. Krishna says, whole material world comes from me. Yataha pravrittir bhutanam. And it doesn't just come from me. You know, a father may produce a child, but the child may go out of control. Krishna is not like that. Krishna says, Yena sarvamidam tatam, I pervade everything. Everything is in my control. I am inside everything. And because everything comes from me, because everything, I am present in everything, therefore, you can serve me with whatever you do in this world. Swakarmana tam abhyarcha. With whatever work you are doing, you worship me through that work. Siddhim vindati manavaha. And if you do like this, you will attain perfection. Siddhim vindati, you will attain perfection. So Krishna is telling over here that we can also make our work into worship. So whatever work we do, if you do it devotional consciousness, Krishna, you are giving me this life, you are giving me this family, you are giving me the skills, you are giving me this job, let me do it for as a service to you, for your pleasure. So when we do that, then the work becomes worship. And in that way, emotion and action both become included in the domain of spirituality. And by hearing and chanting about Krishna, we develop a relationship with Krishna. And by developing a relationship with Krishna, whatever emotions we have, whatever actions that we do, they can also become a part of the process that will bring liberation. And she says this is the enduring result of Krishna's appearance. Enduring means, if you look at the earlier three reasons, they are important reasons, but they apply only for that particular time. Okay, Krishna came to glorify Yadu. Okay, Yadu has come and gone. How is that going to help me? Krishna came to rescue Devaki and Vasudeva. Good. But now they are gone. How is that going to help me right now? Okay, Krishna came to remove the burden of the earth. Okay, the earth was burdened at that time. Krishna did that. But how is that going to help me now? Oh, that is how that is going to help me now is Krishna performed pastimes at that time. And those pastimes we can hear even now. And by hearing and discussing about them even now, we can become purified. So this is the eternal benefit of Krishna's pastime, our descent into this world. That he gives us a legacy of Krishna Katha that we can hear and chant, and through which we can purify ourselves. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Srimati Kunti Maharani ki, Srimad Grantraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna.